Now we've added audio to our apps using the sound demo in the previous video, but now we're going to extend that using sliders to seek backwards and forwards through our audio and to change the volume. And actually this involves a few new techniques within Java and Android development that we haven't used yet. So it's quite a lot to be covered in this video. First off though, we're going to find a new widget that we haven't used, and that is known as the seek bar, essentially a slider. So we're going to drag it in. You're probably used to using these if you've used an Android or iOS device before. So we'll call this one the volume seek bar, and we'll stretch it out to the edge of the screen. So we'll add in constraints left and right there. Let's fix those both to 8, and we'll change the width to match the constraints. Okay, so if we just run that and see how the slider behaves, we should be able to just drag it back and forth. Obviously, we won't be able to control anything with it as yet. Yep, I may have forgotten the top constraint, but you can see at least that is the effect that we want. So our first challenge, after we've added back in the top constraint, is to do something when the user drags that slider along. So let's add in some code to control it. Okay, so we do this in the onCreate method. And we're first going to find our seek bar, and we'll call it volume control. And we'll use good old find view by ID, r.id dot volume. My auto predict is not kicking in too successfully at the moment. That's okay. Volume seek bar, and we'll cast it to a seek bar. And then we take our volume control seek bar and we set an on seek bar change listener, which is exactly what you might think it is. It listens for a change in the seek bar, i.e. it waits until the user moves the seek bar and then calls this method. And within that method, we want to define a new on seek bar change listener. And you can see that gives us 3 handy methods. One is on progress changed. That's the one we're going to be most interested in. But we've also got on start tracking touch and on stop tracking touch. So that's when the user touches the seek bar, and that's when they stop touching the seek bar. For our purposes, those are pretty irrelevant. We only want to know when they change the seek bar. But in some cases, you might want to do something when the user starts touching or stops. Okay, so for now, let's just do a quick log to make sure everything's looking okay. So first, we'll use the tag seek bar changed, but then we'll try and get the value of the seek bar. You can see we've got an integer I there. That's actually the value of the seek bar. So if we convert that to a string, we'll be able to see its value in the logs every time we move it. Let's take a look. Hopefully my seek bar will be in the right place now as well. Here we go, that looks a lot better. Just select the right device. And there you go. You can see it's changing as we move it up and down, and it changes from 0 all the way up to 100. Okay, so that's the basic way to interact with our seek bar. Of course, We don't want to do any actual logging. We want to change the volume. And we do that first by defining an audio manager, which enables us to manage the audio. We'll define it there so that we can access it in any of these methods. And then setting the volume is actually pretty straightforward. We just take our audio manager and we set the stream volume. You can see there's lots of other things you can control when you're working with audio. You might want to play around with those. But for our purposes, we just want to set the stream volume, and we need to put an integer in there. Now, the difficulty is this integer is not a number from 0 to 100. And in fact, it varies from device to device what the maximum volume is. So we need to establish that before we can set it. So we'll do that up here. We can create an integer called max volume, which is going to be equal to the maximum volume of the device that the app is running on. And we can get that from audio manager .get stream max volume. And then there's a number of different maximum volumes that you might want to access, all of which are fairly self-explanatory. We want the music max volume. And then we can just set the maximum value for the seek bar to be whatever the max volume is. So take volume control to access our seek bar and then set max. So it won't be 100 anymore. It will be whatever our max volume is. And then we can set our variables for set stream volume. And the stream type, as before, is stream music. The value that we want to set it to is I. And there are some other options that we could put in there, but we're just going to leave that as 0. Okay, so now we should be able to use the seek bar to set the volume of the device, or at least of the music part of the device. Now we have a crash there. Let's not worry too much about it and find out what's going on. So in the logs, you can see we're attempting to invoke virtual method getStreamMaxVolume on a null object reference. Aha! So what's going on there is I've forgotten to set up my audio manager. So I've created it as a variable, but up here it's just a null variable. It's the same error that I talked about in the previous video if we had tried to pause the audio stream before we'd set it up. So I thought I'd leave that error in because it's quite useful to be able to look in the logs and work out what it is that's going wrong. And so to set up the audio manager, we just use get system service, and then the system service that we need is the audio service. But we do need to cast that to an audio manager. All right, so let's try that again. Now we should be able to control the volume of the device. There we go. I hope you heard that. So it's definitely working, it's controlling the volume, but obviously we've got one problem here, that the slider is starting at 0, but the volume is not initially at 0. So we want to update the slider so it has the initial value of the current volume. So let's do that. Let's create a variable called current volume. And as you might imagine, we're going to use fairly similar code to the line before. So audio manager.get stream volume. And then again, the stream that we want is music. And then again, we want to take our volume control slider and set the current position, which is known as the progress, because it's kind of a progress bar. There we go. So now when we run the app, we should find that it starts off with the current volume, which I think was at 0 rather unhelpfully before. Let's just check the volume's working well. It is. So we're just going to restart the app just to make sure that it does set the seek bar to the current volume level. And there we go. So it's set it to 100% there. Wonderful. So now we have a fully working volume seek bar. Now we're going to add a second seek bar, which will be to actually seek back and forth through the sound effect, or of course music, or whatever sound it is that's being played. So let's add a second seek bar. I'm going to do it this way, just for a bit of variety. We'll add a bigger margin top so that it actually brings it down, maybe even bigger than that. Maybe even bigger than that. There we go. And we'll give it a new ID of scrubbing seek bar, or just scrub seek bar. Scrubbing being a term for moving back and forth within a sound or piece of music. So a quick simple challenge for you. Can you set up our scrub seek bar so that it displays its value in the logs when it's moved up and down? Try to do it without looking too hard at the code that we've got in place for the volume seek bar. Go for it. All right, hope that wasn't too bad. I'll set it up down here. So as before, we'll need to create a seek bar. Call it scrub seek bar this time. Cast it to a seek bar using find view by ID r.id.scrub. Seek bar. It's not finding it there. I'll just see. Yep, does seem to be there. Hopefully it'll pick it up when I run the app. Yep, it did. So if you have that problem, just run the app. Keep your fingers crossed. And then we'll take our scrub seek bar and we'll set an on seek bar change listener, which is going to require a new on seek bar change listener with those methods. And when the progress is changed, as before, we'll log scrub seek bar moved, and then we'll change the value to a string and pop it in the logs. Let's have a look. Okay, here we go. And yeah, as before, we get all the values. Brilliant. So there are a few things we need to change to make this work well. And the first is to set the maximum value of the scrub seek bar to be equal to the length of the piece of audio that's being played. So we know how to set the maximum value because we did it here. So we just use scrub seek bar dot set max, and we want to set it to the length of the audio. The audio is within media player, remember? So we can use media player and then get duration. Okay, So that will mean that we can scrub to the end of the song, but no further. What makes this a little bit more complicated than the volume seek bar though, is that we want this to update as the piece of sound is being played, not when the user actually interacts with it. So we're going to have to regularly update this as the sound is being played. So we need yet another new concept, which is the timer. So timer allows us to do something every second or every minute or every hour while our app is running. And we can create them using new timer, add the timer class, and we want to schedule a timer. There's lots of ways that we can do that, but we want to schedule it at a fixed rate. And within that, we'll need to create a new timer task. There we go, that's our new task, which ends there. So here we will define what we want to happen every second. But just before we do that, we'll define when we want the timer to start. That is now. So 0 seconds or 0 milliseconds in the future. And we want it to run every second. So that is 1,000 milliseconds. So no delay and a period of 1,000 milliseconds. Okay, and the thing that we want to happen is for the seek bar to be updated to the new value of the current position of the media player. So we'll take our scrub seek bar, we'll set the progress to the current position of the media player. And there it is. Okay, so these timers are really useful. And this is a good point to be introduced to them. We should now see the seek bar move by itself as the sound is being played. Let's have a look. There it goes. So you can see that worked, but perhaps for our purposes, every second was a little bit slow. So let's try perhaps every third of a second or so. That looks better. Obviously, the smaller you make the period, the smoother it will be, but the more resource intensive your app will be, use up battery life more quickly, etc. It's up to you to decide balance there. You also might want to start the schedule when the media player actually starts playing and then stop it when it stops playing, as you won't need it then if you want your app to be really efficient. But I'll leave that as a challenge for you. The last thing I'm going to set up here is actually make our seek bar do something. So we want to affect the current position when the scrub seek bar is moved back and forth. And we can do that very easily using media player dot seek to, and then the value we want it to seek to is just the value of the seek bar, I. So we can now control the playing of the sound with the seek bar. If I can grab it. There we go. Sounds quite horrible. And a note there is what you might want to do if you heard that. Seeking whilst the audio is still playing sounds pretty horrendous. So you might want to pause the playing of the audio when the user starts interacting with the seek bar, and then unpause it when they let go of the seek bar. But I'll leave that as a fairly simple exercise for you. Wonderful. So we're nearly done with this section on animations, audio and video. We're just going to take a brief detour into the world of grid layouts to enable us to create the slightly complex layout for our final app of this section, which will be basic phrases.